Let's do the Aaron's guide to CARM, or in other people's words might be the idiot's guide to CARM. Okay, let's dumb this down. Let's make it really simple, because I'll tell you the one problem I'm seeing out there is there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of overcomplicating of things, and honestly, a lot of messages that are putting a massive burden and creating a lot of confusion on e-commerce merchants. So I'd love to really simplify this and boil it down to just the basics to start with, and then we can take a deep dive into all the fun and juicy stuff.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast. And we have an exciting subject today because we have some guests to talk about the most riveting subject going into Canada, CARM. All right, we're excited about this. Okay, let's do some introductions before we just dive into what is CARM. And anyone that's been shipping into Canada, especially carriers, they're right, Aaron. They're very aware of CARM right now. Yeah. So if you haven't heard about it, we hope that today is insightful, and maybe you don't have to worry about it that much, or maybe you do actually have to worry. Well, maybe we can dive into those things.
Now, Clint, CARM is spelled CARM. That's a 4-letter word, just so you know.
It is a 4-letter word.
And it has been for a while in the industry. So we're gonna put a lot of myths to rest here. We're gonna simplify things.
But Aaron, did you know? What did one e-commerce merchant say to the other about CARM registration?
What's that?
Better calm down and get it done before we're all shipped out.
That was so bad it was good. I like it.
Okay.
I like it.
All right. Okay. From GHY, today we have Dewar and Mac West. I think it's Mackenzie, correct? If your full name.
Yes. That limits the confusion.
Yes, we just call you Mac. All right. We have had a lot of amazing subjects and conversations with you guys, but maybe before we dive into this, let's start with you, Mac. Introduce yourself, and then let's go to Al, and then we can dive into the juicy stuff.
Thanks, Clint, and thanks for having us on. CARM has consumed us, and we're happy to be here and talk about it. I guess, my name's Mackenzie West, and I'm the Director of Market Development at GHY. That lives across a couple different spaces in business development and marketing, and understanding opportunity and where it exists in the ever-changing world of trade, and CARM's a big piece of that.
And I'm Al Dewar, and I'm the EVP here, and what that basically means is that I'm old. I've just been here a long time, and this is my first video ever to be shot or with a hat on, but with hair like mine, it's not going to get out of place. So I have been in the business for about 40 years. I've had some great visibility and adventures at not just CARM, but also and we'll probably talk about this a little bit more, how it relates to e-commerce. I was actually an expert witness at the Canadian International Trade Tribunal for Landmark Trade, which is a big e-commerce organization. And a lot of things that happened that precipitated how to facilitate trade in the e-commerce space there. And look forward to connecting some of those knowledge and journeys that existed back then to now.
So you say old, I say experienced, and that's what I think is exciting is with Al is getting all of this experience that you've had, both you and Mac. You're much more well versed in the subject than us. So Aaron, what? How do we get started on this subject? Because I know this can go deep.
All right, here's where I'd like to see this go. Let's do the Aaron's guide to CARM, or in other people's words might be the idiot's guide to CARM. Okay, let's dumb this down. Let's make it really simple, because I'll tell you the one problem I'm seeing out there is there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of overcomplicating of things, and honestly, a lot of messages that are putting a massive burden and creating a lot of confusion on e-commerce merchants. So I'd love to really simplify this and boil it down to just the basics to start with, and then we can take a deep dive into all the fun and juicy stuff. But let's really get the nuts
who needs to worry about it, right? That's the basics.
100%.
Do you need to worry about this?
What do you do if you do need to worry about it, right? But before we dive into that, can you give me the Cliff Note version for me in the Idiot's Guide to what is CARM in general, just kind of a brief overview.
So, you know what, it's the CBSA's assessment and revenue management system. And for lack of a better way of putting it, is the CBSA, they had just way too many siloed processes. They didn't know who owed them money or who they had to pay money back to based on the various types of programs that existed. So what CARM is doing is it's putting everything together in one spot, so that CBSA knows how to balance their books and knows how to connect, or that the importers can connect direct to them to see how CBSA sees their activity. And it reminds me a lot of my grandmother. My grandmother used to have money in each little pocket of her purse. She used to have money in her dresser drawer. She had money in a particular book. And anybody that would have to ever look after grandmother's estate later wouldn't know where to go, because you just wouldn't know where grandma had her money or who she had given money to. Well, CARM is basically allowing CBSA to be that executor and have a direct connection with whoever grandma has empowered in that regard. So I don't know any other way to say it other than the assessment and revenue management. It's all on an after accounting basis.
But it is an actual system, right? That is what CARM is what you referred to for all the tracking. It is a centralized system now. Would that be accurate?
That's exactly right. And it's a portal, right?
Right. Okay. Yep.
So kind of like your bank portal, same thing. And if you're dealing with one bank or you're asking one bank to aggregate information together, you log into that portal and you see whether you have RESPs, or registered education savings plan. You see if you've got credit card debt. You see if you have a mortgage. You see it all in one spot.
Now, that sounds really good and smart for them. But I go back to when I was moving about 6 years ago. I found some envelopes full of money I didn't know I had, and that was really exciting. So you're telling me that's going to go away?
Sorry about that, Aaron.
Well, and we just had Easter, so it's always like an Easter egg hunt. If you go to grandma's house or going through her purse, and all that's going to go away, everything's going to be simplified. So
simplified, is that really the word
for CBSA?
Okay, yeah.
All right. So I think that's.
But you know what? Also for the importer, and here's it from a personal standpoint, and for those of us that have ever been an executor, and I have been recently, I thought I'd closed things out completely. And then I got a call from my accountant just last week, the accountant that was responsible for overseeing the estate. And he says, "Oh, you have to do one final declaration." Well, that one final declaration is costing $500, but in the meantime, I wound up having given all of that money to all of the people involved. And so now I've got to go back to those people and say, "Hey, each one of you owe me $100. And, maybe I don't have the greatest relationship with some of them anymore. So that means I'm out of pocket because I don't have that centralized visibility. And CARM will give that centralized visibility. So the people who have access to the portal will know exactly what's going on in relationship to that business number. And they won't be faced with what I was, because isn't the government really, or aren't there really only two things that we know about we'll all have to face in life: death and taxes? And CARM is just about taxes. And we don't want to talk about death, but I guess I just did.
So in the end, once this thing's up and running, hopefully it'll make everyone's life a little more simple and straightforward. But the transition to CARM is really where there's a lot of friction and trying to figure out how to implement this and get everybody on board. And so just let's dive, and we'll dive into more of those details later. But let's just talk e-commerce merchants and the type of transactions they have. And for now, let's just say I'm an e-commerce merchant and I'm shipping my famous Zonos t-shirts that everybody wants up in Canada. And if I'm selling to just shipping these through the post office or through a UPS, FedEx, DHL, do I need to worry about CARM? If I'm just selling it to your grandma who wants to buy my T-shirts, what is CARM going to impact me?
So it's funny you mention it like that, Aaron. And I'm going to go to another little cheesy phrase into what is it? Keep calm and carry on. Well, let's instead call that keep calm and carry on. Now, whether we choose to keep calm or not, that'll be a side discussion. But what drives payments, or who has to issue the payments, is understanding who the importer of record is for shipments going into Canada. And what e-commerce businesses need to be mindful of is, are they carrying on business in Canada? And there's about 15 different parameters that tax specialists we've got a whole consulting department that looks after this. Legal professions have something similar, as do accountants. Who's the importer? Is it my grandma? If in the case of my grandma, you're probably not wanting to register for CARM because you're just shipping a T-shirt to my grandma. If you are somebody that is going on to CARM's portal or CBSA or CRA's portal, they're going to say to you, Aaron, they're going to say, are you going to, on a global basis, ship more than $30,000 worth of shipments in a year, or sell more than $30,000 of shipments in a year? And you know what? Quite frankly, I think anybody in business is going to sell more than 30,000. But are you carrying on business in Canada? And that's where there's, again, 15 or so different parameters that it's the right mix as to whether or not you have to register. Or is your bank in Canada? Where are the goods being made available? Do you have a sales force and is that sales force in Canada selling those shirts? If you're not checking so many boxes as to carrying on business in Canada, it's entirely possible that, and likely plausible, that the importer is just my grandma and you just want to sell your shirts.
So if I'm, just for simplicity's sake, because I think this fits most e-commerce merchants out there, they've got their website up.
Yep.
They're just putting stuff out there for sale for anybody in the world to buy.
They've
never even been to Canada.
Nope.
Right?
Right.
Like they have nothing.
Nothing's carrying on in Canada for the vast majority, right?
And they are having the grandma or whoever it is buying their goods is the importer of record. And it's probably worth just simplifying that. If you don't know, then your shopper is probably the importer of record.
Right.
The only way they're not is if you, as a business, are actively going out and setting yourself up as a Canadian business to become the importer of record. So just for those listening, so if you're not sure, grandma's the importer of record. And if that's who you're selling to, and you're not doing anything else in Canada, sounds like CARM doesn't really impact you.
Just for end use, right? Like this is a casual import going to grandma. You don't have an entity there. You don't, like you said, you're not carrying on business in Canada. You don't have a lot to worry about with CARM right now. Would that be inaccurate?
That's exactly right. The only reason that you have to register for CARM is if you're a commercial business that has a business number that's responsible for assessing tax or duties as something's crossing the border.
So when you say business number,
anybody that's buying something on a marketplace, if I was to buy something from Mac, let's say I wanted to buy his ladder that he's got up in his office there, I wouldn't be expecting to pay tax on that. I'd just be wanting to get that ladder. But if that ladder happened to cross the border, that all of a sudden has different rules and regulations, well, Mac is certainly not going to want to register for a program and having to start dealing with provincial sales taxes or federal sales taxes. And let's say Mac likes making ladders and ladders go to each one of our provinces. It's not something that he wants to get into. He just wants to sell his ladder, just like you want to sell your T-shirt. And so the business of having duties and taxes paid, that occurs by in this case, grandma, who's buying Mac's ladder.
Gotcha. And it's really all facilitated by the broker that's clearing that shipment through customs, and they're working with grandma on the payment of that duty and tax.
So B2B, B2C, not for the most part.
B2B
probably not impacted.
Yep.
Postal, not impacted at all. Correct. Like that's the other thing is was that accurate? I don't know. Is that accurate? Like USPS going into Canada, the postal stream, postal clearance. If you're shipping that
what's
method,
really sad, and I'll let Mac punctuate a little bit later the differences of how de minimis our team hats work with things coming into Canada. If you send via a courier or a common carrier, there's rules and regulations that should also apply to the post. But for those of us that are buying things via post, and many of us do, and for every courier shipment into Canada, there's about 10 postal shipments. And of those 10 postal shipments, although it's supposed to have similar rules and regulations, like it's even more the wild. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wild Mackenzie West to punctuate.
Yeah, I think on top of the confusion that happens with registration from CARM goes back to the registration of how businesses are doing imports into Canada and that non-resident importer factor. So I think the broad strokes of what we're maybe seeing in communications from industry leaders is broad strokes in the sense that they're trying to get everybody to register because they don't know. And it's a lot of work to unpack all of the I'll call it a mess. It's not a mess, but all of the supply chains that exist in the different fashions and functions, because you could essentially have someone who is living in a business to business world that needs to register, but most of their volumes in the B2C world. They could easily be confused by, well, I need to register for all of this volume. So I think understanding how you're doing business in Canada is definitely step one. But Clint, Aaron, you'd be bang on to say most in that B2C space don't need to register, but you do see industry maybe encouraging registration because there's uncertainty.
Well, can I ask another question then? What if I'm so most retailers selling T-shirts to individuals that are buying them to wear for themselves. Don't need to worry about registering on those. What about if I'm selling to a Canadian business that is going to take my T-shirts and resell them? Does CARM impact me, or does it impact that Canadian business?
It goes again back to the importer of record. It could happen either way. I think it depends on how that initial sales agreement was lined up. So you're selling to me, I'm in Canada. When we come to terms on that agreement for me to wholesale your T-shirts, who's importing them? Is it you? Are you setting up as a non-registered, non-resident importer to make it seamless for me to purchase your product?
I'm not going to do that, Mac. No.
Yeah, then it's me. It's me, the Canadian, for sure.
All right. So if I'm selling to you, I'm still not having to do anything, but you are. So is there any risk when CARM goes live that if you're not set up with CARM, that some of those T-shirt shipments I'm sending to you are going to get held up and not clear and have problems?
Okay, so nothing's going to get later. You're going to be right. Like, so Mac West Enterprises is the importer of record. He has a business number. It's incumbent on Mac, in order to account for things into Canada Border Services Agency, it's incumbent on him to register in the portal, because if he doesn't register, he doesn't exist. But where the government is sitting right now, which is very frustrating because this CARM program should have been live 3 years ago. 30% of importers, admittedly, they're the biggest importers, they're registered, but 70% are not. So what the government has decided to do as part of a transition is they've said, okay, we're not going to stop any shipment because we don't want warehouses to clog up. We're going to make sure that every shipment just flows right through. So Mac's shipment of t-shirts is going to come to him. Mac still hasn't registered, Mac West Enterprises still hasn't registered on the portal. His broker, and we hope it's us, Mac, we really hope it's us. His broker is going to call Mac and say, hey, Mac, you haven't registered. Will you register? And if Mac says no, then we have a decision to make as to we process something on our broker business number for the next year and bill Mac on our account. Like, that's like me putting my Visa down and saying, Mac, he's good for it. I'm just going to do that. And in many cases, many brokers are going to do that as we're seeking to try to assist people in registering or closing that 70% gap. But maybe Mac, maybe he stiffed us before. He's a little bit slow. Well, in those cases, we're going to say Mac West Enterprises, well, hey, buddy, we cleared the shipment and we've created this liability that's sitting on your portal, which is your problem. So you're going to have to figure out how to account for it, but we've released it. That's the transition plan Canada Border Service Agency has put into place. And we're all going to see how that plays out in the next 4 to 8 weeks ahead. It certainly looks like it could be exciting or interesting.
Okay, hold on a sec. The message you're giving me right now is very different from what we're hearing. I'm hearing a whole bunch of Armageddon doomsday kind of stuff, that when the CARM portal goes live, the world's going to come to an end if you're not registered. But it sounds to me like there's a transition period where everyone's going to have a chance to kind of acclimate and warm up to this. So it's not going to impact the B2C shipments anyways. And even the B2B are going to flow, and we're going to start working with Mac's t-shirt company and any other businesses in Canada that are importing. There's going to be a transition where things are still going to flow, but they're going to be educating a lot of those Canadian businesses that are importing goods sounds like for the next year, for the first year. Is that right?
The education, Aaron, is exhausting. Like, we've been doing that for 3+ years right now, and we're only at 30%. Like, so the government is they've just kicked the problem down the road because they knew if they stopped things at the border, that would create quite a catastrophe from a social media standpoint and public awareness standpoint. So instead, what they've done is they've ensured that the border will be open, things are going to flow right through, and they're expecting industry and themselves will try to unpack the accounting.
Okay.
Now, on the plus side, again, if 70 to 80% of volume is probably 80% of the volume is flowing through that is registered, 80% is going to be fine. It's going to be the 20% that's going to have the trade and brokerage community scrambling and wanting to talk about a program that is in many ways difficult to understand.
Okay. But the initial rollout's not going to be a massive disruption. There's going to be a transition period in hopes. I mean, the hope here is that other 70% gets registered over the course of time and things start flowing the way we want to, but there won't be a massive holdup at the border where things are disrupted right away. Is that
absolutely
accurate?
But you know what? I think about what we should have learned from the Americans. Like, us Canadians, you in America have done this with your ACE system, I don't know, about 20 years ago. And originally you had grandiose thoughts of that everybody would register too. But then you later said, you know what? We're just going to have everything happen on the program, but registration is optional. Not mandatory, but it's optional. And so here you are 20 years in, and you've only got about 10% of importers that are registered in your portal, in your ACE portal, and are actively using it. You've got 90% that things are happening on the system, but they're not registered in the portal. In Canada, we had this grandiose thought that within 2 years, we'd have 100% of people registered. And guess what? We're well short of that.
How short?
Well, 70% short.
Can I ask a scenario that I know comes up? You know, we talk about B2B and B2C. How is that even defined? Like, let's say let's say Mac is buying a T-shirt for himself, and sorry to pick on you here, Mac, but let's say he's buying a T-shirt for himself, and he decides to have it shipped to the GHY office instead of his home, but it's still he's buying it for himself to wear. Is that B2B or B2C? How is it? How do you define that?
That's B2C. Like, it's Mac buying a shirt.
Okay, how I've actually seen, because I've seen some shipments where it certain brokers or couriers might just look at the address it's going to, and it's going to a business, so they classify it as a B2B in the way they treat it. But you're telling me that's really not 100% the right way to do it. It's understanding who's buying it and why. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. And I think what will happen with CARM is that's going to, maybe Mac's intention was to have the company pick up his tab there. But what's going to wind up happening with CARM is that the business account manager, the party that's overseeing the CARM account, they're going to see all things that connect with the business account, and they'll be looking to reconcile things later that perhaps they weren't reconciling before.
So I'm still not following then. Okay, makes sense that, of course, I mean, it was a casual import, it was for Mac. But how did they determine what is the either on the paperwork or with the business number? If it is a B2B B2C shipment, I'm just doing a casual import selling T-shirts. How do they know that that's the case, even though it's going to a business address?
They're not looking at it. They're not looking at all the documents. They're looking at the information that they have. They're figuring that, hi, I'm a courier that has an account with these people, or I have a specified process that just outreaches to these business. You get a receptionist pick up and say, hi, we've got this shipment going to Mac West. Yeah, Mac West works here. They just apply it to the company's business number without the appropriate due diligence in many cases. Not in all cases, but probably in more than we'd want to admit.
Aaron, do you think that's accurate with the express carriers from what we've seen and what we're hearing from the express carriers, that they're like a UPS, FedEx, DHL? Are they, you think they're just looking at the business address or doing it just
I
like
know some of them are.
Yeah, that's my worry. I think I
totally
agree with Al. That this is practically that shouldn't be happening, but I think we're worried that it is happening. That sometimes if it's going to a commercial address,
I think if I understood Al right, it's they're gonna sort out. I think CARM might actually put a spotlight on that, because it's gonna. I don't think GHY wants to be responsible for Mac's T-shirt. So,
well, actually, we wouldn't mind. Mac's a good guy.
Okay, all right. Well, you trust Mac, all right. Unless he he was importing more than just T-shirts, right? But let's.
Very good. Aaron, that's an outstanding point.
Well, and
what else has Mac got coming to GHY that it reminds me of? Would I pick up Mac's luggage and carry it through a security check? Right.
Yeah. So okay, I want to boil this down a little bit, because I want to dive into some of that deeper, juicier stuff here. But okay,
so you're going to summarize for me, Aaron, the You're Now Idiot's Guide to CARM.
All right. And then I'm going to add in one other element to this, which we Mac touched on earlier, that we need to talk to. But all right, unless I'm actually actively trying to do business in Canada and I've got a sales force there, or I've got product there, that's a little more complex. If you're a normal e-commerce merchant that says, hey, I just want to open up sales to Canada and let people come in and buy my products off of my website, and I'm just going to ship it to them with them being the import of record, which means I'm not really doing anything. I'm just doing a normal shipment. It's not going to impact me. In fact, on a B2C shipment, it doesn't impact anybody. On a B2B shipment, it would impact the business importing it, but not right away. They're going to there's a transition period. So world's not coming to an end. So that's awesome.
Yep.
Did I get that part right?
Absolutely.
Okay. The next part is, which I really want to touch on, is NRI, which is a non-resident importer. That's when a non-Canadian business can set up a Canadian business number, become a Canadian business, and become the importer. Really what you're doing is you're putting yourself in the shoes of that Canadian business that's importing the goods, and now you become the Canadian business importing the goods, which that's what CARM impacts. CARM impacts Canadian businesses bringing goods into their country and acting as the importer. So the reason why I want to touch on this is we've seen a lot of noise around an NRI, and there's been a couple of the bigger carriers pushing e-commerce merchants to get registered for an NRI for some reason, but it's in preparation for CARM because there's been messages that the world's coming to an end. And I think NRIs are valuable, but are they really necessary for everybody?
Are they even as valuable as they were in the past, right? NRI was kind of a simple way, right? You had an NRI when in your past life doing e-commerce, and it was just a simple way to pay the duties and taxes on behalf of the importer. But now it's actually possibly getting more complicated. So do I even want to keep my NRI might be another question too.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up a good question too, is if you've got an NRI and you don't know if you should, why you have your NRI, right? Like, I don't know, someone set it up. I don't know why we even have it. It may be worth reassessing if you want to keep it.
Yep.
Right.
Because that as we all know now, whoever has their business number on there, they're the ones now with the extra work. And are you the one that wants to take on that extra burden?
Yeah.
As a merchant, right? With your NRI.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So Idiot's Guide on who it impacts. If I'm just selling to Canadian, we're assuming I'm not doing anything special in Canada. I'm just selling to Canadian customers, whether it be business or consumers. It doesn't impact me. Unless I set up an NRI, it does impact me. And Canadian businesses out there that are bringing goods in, it impacts them. So let's talk through a few nuts and bolts of if it does impact you, you've got an NRI, or you're a Canadian business, what are the few basic steps you need to do to prepare for CARM?
Wait, is this the deep dive now that we're going
Nope,
into? Nope, not
not
yet.
even.
Okay.
This is just
all right.
For the people that it impacts. What do you got to do? Just my thought is you talk to your broker and delegate authority, or those are the types of things I've heard. But what's the simple things I need to do to make sure I'm ready to go?
Before I let you go into the specifics on what to do, I think unpacking the NRI use case and what I learned when I joined this industry and I don't know 12 years ago, and when I was an inside salesperson trying to understand what it meant, the non-resident program, essentially the pitch from a Canadian broker talking to an American company is Canada's an additional California that you can do business in by simply registering as an NRI. So that registration being so easy for a non-resident Canadian company to operate and import into Canada under their, applied for business number or importer number into Canada, it creates another California for American companies or global companies for that matter. And it's not overly challenging. You've got tax to consider and duty. In many cases, there's free trade with American companies or can be free trade with American companies. So at its core, I think the program was pitched in a way that it was accessible and easy to use. And I think is where a lot of the confusion with who needs to register for CARM comes into play, because I would imagine a lot of companies could utilize both channels in B2B, which would be the NRI program, and then B2C, where it's the casual importation for the person. So I think table setting with, why is NRI being floated so much? There's definite value to it. But understanding your use cases is the core to CARM. But over to, Alan, what is the step for an NRI?
So the interesting thing is Mac alluded to there, Canada wants to be California because it's damn cold up here. We'd like things to be a little bit warmer. So NRI
Al,
is about...
Al, I just want to point out the state code for California is CA.
Hey, look at that.
Look at that.
We're getting closer.
Yep.
So it's a sales, the angle that Mac alluded to there, it's a sales angle. So as businesses are looking to be a non-resident importer, they're looking at that mix as to how they're selling into Canada. What's their place of delivery? What's their place of payment? what place or are their agents and employees located? Where are the purchases that occur? Where are the assets that are acquired? Where are transactions solicited? Where are contracts made? Where's your bank account? Where and how is the non-resident's name and business listed in any type of directory? All of these factors factor in to whether or not somebody should be a non-resident importer. And if they're a non-resident importer, as Mac alluded to, the sales are that much easier. We've got many non-resident importers in Canada here for selling goods into the United States, because in the United States, or when they're buying something, they don't want the headaches, or they don't want something that later might cost them as a result of poor application of a tariff classification or a free trade agreement. That they just want their stuff. So when it comes down to, if you are a non-resident importer, you chose to do that based on how you are carrying on. Again, keep CARM and carry on, or keep calm and carry on. You chose to do that because it made sense to your business. If you did that, you were required to fulfill the payment of taxes based on where your goods are going to, because you're choosing to own that for the party that's actually bought it in Canada. So you're choosing to own that responsibility. In order to continue to do that in that fashion, you have to register on the portal, or else you won't be able to account for your shipment. Your shipment won't be able to be accounted for.
Okay, so that's
all we're saying, or I'm saying, is that as you look at the factors as to whether or not you are carrying on business in Canada, there's a whole list of parameters that should be weighed, and maybe they should have been weighed at the beginning in certain cases, because maybe you were simply just selling the Zonos t-shirt because they're that hot that those things just sell themselves.
They're quite comfortable, by the way.
So, I think to punctuate in a couple bullet points. If you're an NRI, you have to register. You need to delegate authority, and you should have access to your statement of account. Your statement of account being that common ledger of credits and debits with reference to duties and tax, and that's the visibility that's going to exist under CARM.
How much time are we talking? Okay, so we're talking getting registered. Is that just an online portal where you go in and set yourself up? Is that what that means?
Yep.
Okay, and how long does that take to do that?
It depends how easily accessible the data is for what we'll call two-factor authentication questions to get your registration done.
Okay.
Al, what would you say on the low side? 10 minutes?
I say 15, sure.
Sweet.
Sure. And then
you're younger, much faster typer. I've seen you working with your thumbs. Me, I'm, as Clint would say, experienced. I'm more of a 15-minute guy. So,
but on the high side, it turns into multiple meetings because you're trying to track down data to understand your 2FA or your two-factor authentication.
Okay. That makes sense. Sometimes they ask some questions that are like, oh, wait, I don't have that information readily available. But if you do, super simple.
In addition to that, Aaron, I live in East St. Paul, Manitoba. Your address has to be exactly how you registered when you first registered. Well, East could be just an E and a period. Saint could be an ST period or SAINT. I guess you can't do anything with Paul, but there's a whole lot of variables that can exist in just getting your address right. So you have to have your address perfect as to how CRA has your address registered, Canada Revenue Agency, how they have their address registered in their system. If it's not a perfect match, you're stopped right there. And those stoppages have been greatly impacting people's ability to register on the portal.
So portal, the process, if everything lines up, is actually really simple, but it's a bit picky, it sounds like, which can definitely add delays to getting registered. But let's say I jump through the hoops, I get registered, and then the next step is delegating authority. Is that what is that right? Okay. What does that mean? What's the process there?
It essentially means you're giving GHY or your customs broker delegation to act on your behalf. That's above and beyond what we would call in Canada a general agency agreement, similar to a power of attorney in the United States. The delegation within the portal is, the icing on that cake so that we can act on your behalf.
Got it.
Makes sense.
And technically, I could act on my own behalf if I really wanted to, if I was feeling super motivated.
Whoa. But
I think most people are going to want to delegate authority to an expert to manage everything on their behalf. Is there any other steps? Is that kind of it?
Well, later there's going to be a step, but this is another one of those things in a transition plan. The government had wanted to have security in place, and whether that be a bond or just a prepayment for whatever your highest previous month had ever been in the past year, the government's looking to have security posted in place so your goods can just flow freely across the border and you'll account for things later. For many people, they struggle with that in that, like, who prepays their credit card bill? If you were to work in that fashion, what's the purpose of having a credit card? But the government is, because they're opening up the border to the degree that they want to have security or surety in place to know that, and that has to be in place by, I think it's going to wind up being November of 2024. So they've given people 180 days from when they go live, basically 6 months from when they open up the next phase of CARM, 180 days for businesses to get their act together.
So for me, if I'm an e-commerce business, though, if I get on the portal, jump through the picky portal, and I get that done, and then I work with GHY to delegate authority, are you going to kind of hold my hand the rest of the way? Whoever it is I'm working with that I'm delegating authority to, are you going to help me and guide me through the rest of the nuances and the steps, or do I have to be the expert and understand everything?
Well, I thought you were the idiot, so I hope you don't have to be the expert. That's what you called this thing.
That's
the Idiot's Guide to CARM.
That's where I'm coming from. I don't want to deal with all that. So I'm hoping that whoever I'm delegating authority to is going to help guide me through the rest of the steps. But is that accurate?
It's partially accurate. Like our goal, and as most service providers would be, our goal would be to facilitate and support that with you. However, the challenge to how the portal is currently designed right now is we don't get to see the same things you get to see. And what I mean by when I say that is there's something on financial security or finances that if you delegate to us, we get to see what we've done. We may even get to see what other people have done. But what we might not see is you might owe a whole lot of money that hasn't been paid, or you might have all kinds of late accounting penalties from hopefully a service provider other than GHY. And in that case, you'd have to give us access as if we were an employee of yours, or you would have to do a screen share in order for us to support and walk through that with you. We won't have the same view or visibility to your account as you do as an importer.
So Aaron, my suggestion to you would be, you better be dang sure you want an NRI, right? Because this, though you will get some hand holding possibly, right? But there's maybe some visibility they don't have. But if you're going to have that NRI at the end of the Idiot's Guide, it's like, you kind of know what you're doing. I don't know if the idiots should have an NRI. Yeah.
I think you need to be intentional about an NRI,
right.
And there's a ton of benefits to it for the right use cases.
Correct.
But it sounds like the steps today are get through the picky portal, delegate authority to those that are going to be handling your packages, and you're kind of done for today. And then it sounds like some bond things and things will come in the future, but that's really what you need to do today are those two steps.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything on that?
We just talked for an hour what you said in 5 minutes or 5 seconds. Good job.
Well, let's then finish up this part one of our understanding CARM for cross-border e-commerce. The first part was the Idiot's Guide, and then the next part let's go into the deep dive.